Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Atlantic Council's global headquarters. I'm Charles Lichfield, Deputy Director of the Atlantic Council's Geoeconomic Center, and we're going to try something a little bit different now. We have invited different officials from different countries in Central and Southeastern Europe, and also a former official from the Trump administration, and a banker who's involved in the region, to try and mix things up a little bit and try to figure out how the region is feeling about its own economy, its outlook. We can talk about the WEO and the outlook for their countries as well, but also how they are relating to the Trump administration's plans on trade. There have also been some thoughts in response to that on Europe's autonomy. So I think we can talk about all of those things. And we're going to try to get some of our audience members to participate as well. So we're calling this the Central and Southeast European Economic Dialogue, a new sort of experiment for the Atlantic Council Spring Meetings events. But I'm very excited that we've got some excellent panels here with us. And we'll get started hearing their impressions about their economy and the week. And then we'll get going with some questions and some audience participation. So get ready. First of all, we have Petar Chobanov of the Bank of Bulgaria. Thank you very much, sir, for joining us. You've been serving the Bulgarian government and central bank for quite a long time, so can't think of anyone better, actually, to describe what's going on in your country, but also in the region. So you have the floor for a few minutes, and then we'll move on down the panel. But I'm really looking forward to the discussion later on. Over to you.
Thank you very much for inviting me. Really, it is a very important moment in time, and this is when we have this uncertainty in place. And for every one development, it is really important to have such discussions in order to find the way ahead and to find some common sense, which for me is missing in the latest years. And probably this is one of the most important problems ahead of the development and perspectives. Bulgarian economy is doing rather well. I can say previous year we experienced 2.8% growth. And this year, our expectations are also for such a growth, 2.8%. The main driver of the growth is private consumption, because we have a tight labor market, we have an increase in wages and compensation per employee. Our expectations for this year is they to increase by 9.3%. And it is good that up to now we have no problems with competitiveness, although we have such increases in incomes. But they prove to be good ground for private consumption. It will grow by 4%, and then we also expect good growth in terms of investments. It will be above 7%, and it is run by some military equipment which we bought from United States and will be delivered this year. They are important, but also we have the government established a good program in order to develop further regions, municipalities in Bulgaria. So a lot of investments in infrastructure will be also done this year, and this will help to the growth as well. From the net export, we expect that it will be negative for the growth this year, but this is mainly because of the fact that we have some maintenance work in one to our main exporters, and this is temporary. And for the next years, we expect that this will revive and will have also very good growth. So I think that in terms of the risks which confronts the economy, we have clear upside risk in terms of our Eurozone accession. As you know, we expect on 4th of June the two reports from ECB and European Commission to be published, and we are advancing well, and we hope that we will have yes on two reports. And then it is upon us how we will utilize this. And if we utilize this, if we could approach investors, I think that this will give us additional increase of the scale of the economy. And then growth could be even higher this year in comparison to our expectations of 2.8%. So I think that we do a lot of work, both the government, the central bank, of course, we run the process, and the commercial banks as well, and a lot of efforts are put, and I think that we are coming to the result that we're expecting, and if we achieve this, this will be very good. Of course, in such uncertainty like we experience today, there are downside risks as well. They could stem from the foreign trade. When you look at our figures, actually 2.5% of our export is oriented directly to the United States. If you go through value added, This is 4%, which accounts at about 1.6 billion euro. It is not so much, but however, the indirect effects are unclear right now, and we'll see what will happen with trade routes with some supply chains problems, etc. And that's why we are here in Washington attending these meetings in order to gather opinions, in order to participate in such discussions. And as I said, the main task, our task is how to draw the way ahead. So how to cope with this crisis. Our currency board arrangements serve very well to us since 1997. So we passed through several crises. We achieved very good results, and we cope with the shocks. And however, the main exit strategy, of course, is joining the Eurozone, and we hope that we will prove to be very successful example how currency board, how such a stable framework could be run in order to achieve the main goal, which is Eurozone accession. I could stop here, and I'll be glad to answer your questions.
Thank you. Just a very brief question. Are you more or less optimistic after your days in Washington?
I'm okay. We have to be rational, and we have to look at the best possible strategy ahead. So I couldn't say whether I'm more or less optimistic, but as I said, my main goal is how to find the way and what we could do in EU, for example, and when you join in the Eurozone, what could we do to prove to be more stable, more united, and to go ahead.
Thank you very much. We'll come back to all of these questions. I hope through this session that we'll come up with some ways towards a solution. And there are certainly a lot of things that Europe and this region in particular has to offer the United States. If we can move over to you, Wojtek. Wojtek Belling is from the Czech National Bank, but has also served Czechia in many positions, including in the Czech government. So the same question goes to you. Your outlook for your domestic economy, but also how you feel about how things are going in Washington, D.C. this week. Thank you.
So thank you very much for inviting me. Just for the beginning, as a sort of disclaimer, I have to say that I'm not representing the Czech National Bank as the monetary policy authority, because we are not only monetary policy authority, but also supervisory authority, and I'm in the supervisory part doing financial regulation, just to make it clear. So I have nothing to do with monetary policy decisions. And I have to say also that I'm a lawyer, not an economist. Concerning the Czech economic outlook for this year, we expect, or the growth which was expected before the decision of President Trump on trade was expected to be around 2%, and for the next year slightly above, so around 2.5, 2.6%. Main drivers of the growth are, like in Bulgaria, also domestic consumption, thanks to increase in wages, and also the spending in households in the last three years. Then also the government spending and gross capital formation in lesser extent. Concerning main risks, obviously we are small open economy, very dependent on exports, and in particular on automotive sector, and from the regional point of view on Germany. So on one side, of course, there should be a positive expectations concerning German fiscal package, but not for this year, but rather for the next year. So it's in the horizon of 1.5 years approximately. But at the same time, of course, as the German economy will be definitely affected by the tariffs, by the US tariffs, we expect impacts here, which are for now hardly to estimate. So there is an estimation of the Ministry of Finance that it could be around some 0.6, 0.7 percentage points in the growth. We do not have our estimation yet. Our forecast is being prepared for the Czech National Bank, but definitely there will be some impact, not direct, like my colleague from Bulgaria said, but indirect effects will be quite significant given this export orientation of the economy. Concerning other risks, definitely also labor labor force shortages. We have very low unemployment rate, so that could also affect the future development. But we have also, in principle, concerning your last question, we have in principle positive expectations afterwards. Or seeing what is happening now, slightly positive that there will be also a positive move, and even in the field of tariff negotiations between EU and United States, we hope so.
Thank you very much indeed. We will come back to all of these questions, of course, but I'm now very happy to give the floor to Dan Negrea, who's a distinguished fellow at the Atlantic Council's Freedom and Prosperity Center. And thank you very much for coming back to Washington to speak to us, Dan. It's really quite an honor to have you on this panel, not least because you served the first Trump administration. So we're hoping that you may have some insights into, first of all, what might come in the next few weeks. We are in a 90-day window where tariffs have been suspended, or at least the reciprocal ones have. But also, I think you might be able to give us some insights into what the long-term plan might be. You're an American citizen, you've been in this country for a long time, but you do also hail from the region that we're discussing today. So I thought you'd be a perfect addition to our panel, and happy to give you the floor. Thank you.
Thanks for inviting me, Charles. And for all of you, I want to tell you that I'm continuing the tradition in this panel as being the fourth person who speaks with an accent. And I think my colleague here will continue the tradition. So it will, but there are different accents just to keep you confused. Talking about the very significant strategic changes that were brought about the Trump administration, if one were to read the press, one would get the impression that this is extraordinary, unprecedented. We're all unprepared because this has never happened before. But this is not so. Looking at the United States, in the early 1970s, President Nixon took the United States off the gold standard. It was a huge, traumatic change, a major shock to the international financial system that depended on the relation between the dollar and gold. He didn't tell anyone, he just announced it one day, and it just happened. President Reagan, I see in the back of the room the illustrious Matt Kroenig, with whom I had the honor of writing a book, We Win, They Lose, about the Reagan revolution in America's geostrategic approach, moving from détente to a more aggressive position towards the Soviet Union. Again, it was a major change. Détente, being nice to the Soviets because they were the rising power and we were the declining power, was the standard. But Reagan changed all that, and when the Russians violated the INF Treaty, put Pershing missiles in Europe, there were 1 million people in the streets in New York demonstrating, 600,000 in Holland, and that's a smaller country, hard to get 600,000. But anyway, but he put up with it because that change was necessary. But major strategic changes are not only in the American tradition, they're also in the European tradition. Brexit, anyone? And also in the 1960s, General de Gaulle, at the height of the Cold War, decided to make a 12-day trip to the Soviet Union. And he took France out of NATO, which infuriated President Johnson so much that he asked Dean Rusk, the Secretary of State, to call de Gaulle and say, you said you want every single American soldier out of France. Do you want us to dig up also the American dead soldiers who rescued France in both the First and the Second World War? And de Gaulle said, no, you can leave the cemeteries, just the living soldiers out. But those were big traumatic changes. So President Trump is in that tradition, and de Gaulle said countries don't have friends, they have interests, and Lord Palmerston in 1848, in a speech in the British Parliament, said, "We do not have eternal friends and we do not have perpetual enemies. We have our interests are perpetual and eternal, and those that we need to pursue." Okay, so what are the two major points of friction between the United States and Europe? There is a third one, which is the culture, but we'll leave that aside. So let's focus on the security and economic domains. In the security domain, I will summarize the change brought by the Trump administration as follows. Considering Article 5 sacred, has been an article of faith in US-European strategic relations. What the Trump administration has brought in is the following point. We will recognize Article 5 as sacrosanct only for those European countries that consider Article 3 sacrosanct. Article 5 says every member should help the others. By the way, it doesn't say military means, just needs to help. But Article 3 says that there is an obligation of the NATO members to use all efforts to arm themselves. But this has not happened. So in 2014, after the first invasion of Ukraine, the European NATO members got together, I mean, all the NATO members got together in Wales and agreed to 2%. By the time Trump came to power in 2018, only a quarter of them were meeting the 2% quota. By the time of and then Trump said, we are pulling out. They said, don't pull out. And then they spent another few $100 billion. But by the time of the second invasion of Ukraine, 2/3 were meeting that threshold. Why does that make sense? Why should America support the security of a continent as populous as the United States and as rich as the United States? It's about, call it 300, 400 million people, both of them, and about a quarter of world GDP. So President Trump is basically saying, you need to live up to your obligation on security matters. On the tariffs, okay, so what's the outlook of that? President Trump has requested 5% expenses. It's a very high bar.
Expenditure on defense.
Expenditure on defense of GDP. If you read The Art of the Deal, President Trump tells us, you ask for a lot. It will be 3.5, which is, Germany is at 1.5. They say they are at 2, but not really, but okay. So significant increases by everybody. Okay, tariffs. After the Second World War, it was in the interest of the United States to help Europe to rebuild. At that time, there was not only investments from the United States, but also a lot of willingness on the part of the United States to allow European countries to introduce non-tariff barriers to American exports. It didn't matter. The United States had 50% of world GDP. It made no difference. We wanted to help our European allies. But things have changed. Europe is very wealthy right now. And the United States doesn't see a good reason why, for example, US tariffs are at 2.5% and European tariffs are at 5%, while there are very significant non-tariff barriers, for example, to agricultural goods from the United States. So what we have seen the Trump administration do is impose a 10% universal tariff that goes to everybody, and then on top of that, what is called the reciprocal tariff, which is probably not the best term, maybe a proportional tariff would be a better term, essentially taking the trade deficit and divided by the total trade number. that formula, the purists, the economists, the sophisticates with PhDs from great schools say the formula is imperfect, and I'm prepared to concede that point. But it does capture the fact that the relationship is unequal, that there is a problem with. So for example, everybody says, yeah, but look, Madagascar, they only export vanilla and, I don't know, textiles. So that formula doesn't mean anything. Or Israel, for example, they have 0 tariffs, but they got hit with 17% reciprocal. Why does that mean? But it just says that there is a problem there. So.
What's the destination?
I'm sorry?
The destination.
My prediction is that we are going to see very soon deals with Japan, North Korea.
South Korea.
I'm sorry, South Korea. Yeah, North Korea would be very nice.
North Korea didn't get any tariffs, I don't think.
Wouldn't
But
make
there's
any
no
difference.
trade.
They are dirt poor anyway.
Deals with Japan and South Korea.
Japan, South Korea, I think India is next in line. European Union, I'm very confident that there will be a deal fairly soon, and it will be harder to have a deal with China.
Thank you very much. I'm sure we'll return to all of this. Our final speaker, at least on this panel, but we will have audience participants very soon. Final speaker on the panel is Jan Różycka, who's the head of public affairs for the PPF group, which supports the Jew Economic Center. So thank you also, Jan, for joining us. I think you may want to respond to some of the comments Dan has made. You're an economist too, so maybe you also have a problem with the formula that the Trump administration used.
A little.
Okay, a small, maybe some mild criticism of the formula, but also I'm curious to hear about some opportunities.
Okay.
Go ahead.
I would do it geographically. It's already been mentioned, Bulgaria and Czech Republic. We are investor in both countries. We are actually one of the largest global investors in the region, Central and Southeast Europe. We are very bullish on the region. Some of the reasons why it was already mentioned by colleagues here. Let me talk about 3 countries that are, like, for a long time, fastest growing economies of Europe. It's not in West, it's not in Scandi, it's not in South, it's Poland, Croatia, and Romania. And there is a consensus on, let's make things happen. Similarly, like in Bulgaria, Schengen, Eurozone, stable government, reforms. We see it in Poland, we see it in Croatia. Even though, for example, in Poland, they fight a lot on the right and the left, but on basic economic or geo-economic and strategic thinking, it's similar. Including military spending. Yes, you mentioned Germany, but Poland, there are not enough tanks in the world for Poland to buy. Romanian army is similar. Czech army is growing. In Croatia, they are thinking about conscription again. So situation in Central and Eastern Europe, it's a little bit different. We have a problem with Russia. We love United States from historical perspective. You mentioned plenty of presidents, starting with Woodrow Wilson and FDR and Truman, and finishing with Madeleine Albright and Bill Clinton. We care a lot about the United States because what they done for us. So I would say there is I'm very optimistic about Central and East Europe. Yes, we are all open export-driven economies, which is now complicating our life by what is happening here. There is a problem with aging, like everywhere else. We see it. That's why debate about immigration, some kind of immigration, cannot be avoided. Specifically, northern part of Central and Eastern Europe, we have excellent relations now about refugees from Ukraine. We would like to keep them. We would like to keep our Ukrainians in Czech Republic and Poland and other countries. They are excellent fit. But otherwise, I'm very positive. And as we vote with our money as a company. And our strategic shift, unlike many others, we are leaving Asia, we are moving to Europe. We are completely out of Russia, completely out of China. We just sold Indonesia and Philippines to MUFG. And we are investing much, much more in Central and Southeast Europe, happily. So this is positive. Then if we move here, you mentioned that I'm an economist. I teach my students. was teacher back in old days in Beijing and Hong Kong and now in Europe. Maybe David Ricardo was wrong. Maybe not. Maybe trade is a zero-sum game. Probably not. We all know we have plenty of data from Smoot-Hawley Act and Herbert Hoover administration, what had happened elsewhere, and we can go, we can have a whole panel about protectionism, which is sort of theory. Let's use a metaphor that I'm a cook. I'm trying to cook delicious dinner at Michelin star restaurant. So I have recipes, then I have ingredients, and then I need to be able to cook. And then my guests at the restaurant need to believe me that I won't poison them with my cooking. So there is some predictability and trust in this. So theoretical background, I already mentioned a few of them. Then I don't want to go in this travesty of formula, but predictability and trust is the key element. And I don't think that anyone would have a problem with you, Professor, being the President of the United States in your very civil way to explain what are the problems. We know it from in Central and Eastern Europe about military spending, about whales, absolutely. I think you mentioned Nixon. Yeah, I decided this is the decision from tomorrow. Yes, there was unhappiness, a lot, but it happened. It's a bit complicated to change recipe every day and then say in the beginning, hey, I'm going to do beef Wellington, and at the end to say, from the beginning it was bouillabaisse. So this, and then you see problem on the market. Recession in this country is a very possible thing.
Do you think that's the tariffs or the uncertainty around the tariffs?
Both.
But what's the predominant factor?
US-China. I lived 6 years in China. I know PBOC well. They are smart economists who prepared for this for years. And if you look now on their own cuisine, the menu they are preparing, starting with stock buybacks, signals to the market, VAT, killed on the goods that shall be exported to be consumed at home. They have a quite window with yuan. So they are preparing. For them, and them meaning the party, or even more the Politburo, their stakes is much higher. It's not a game, it's not an entertainment, it's not reality show. It's existential. They won't cave at all. They won't blink. They won't blink. They won't blink. It's because economic suffering, if there will be some for them, it's less important for them than face of the party. Just this fight, let's say that everything else will be stable, there will be deals, and so everybody happy at the end. Just the fight between China and the US is a problem for this economy. Manufacturing, again, I don't want to do basic economic lecture, but just look on unemployment in this country, the United States. Who will do the manufacturing? Yes, there are politicians on Fox News saying that there will be robots, but it's a problem to transform economy. But again, it's absolutely fine to have a debate about economy from perspective of national security, semiconductors, renewables. We learned during COVID that dependency on one country is a problem. Even with the basic stuff, for example, in the world there are only 2 places that are manufacturing global majority of so-called APIs, so basically the drugs, the elements, molecules. It's Hyderabad in India, and it's Guangdong province in China. And we saw during COVID that even such a primitive product like a face mask can be weaponized, because there was ban on export from China, and whoever wanted to buy sanitizers and masks, they had to go to Beijing to kowtow and kiss the ring. So from this perspective, I think normal economic theories won't work, and that it's absolutely fine that if governments believe that semiconductors shall be produced in this country, but there's a policy. It's not this, whatever it is. So I am skeptical. I would say I'm skeptical to the tradecraft happening. Markets see it. It would be great to have a deal soon. I would say now even bad deals, but stable ones, are better than uncertainty for investors. I speak with a lot of, and during this week I spoke with
Bad deal is better than no deal.
I think so. Uncertainty is now, because we cannot afford that in the morning there is a signal, we will de-escalate with China. In the afternoon, we will escalate with China. I can go on.
They haven't changed policy that frequently. It's been 3 or 4 big changes.
Yeah, but in
Already.
3 weeks.
Already destabilized.
So
I think I'll give Dan an opportunity to respond, if you don't mind, Jan. So you're being very polite to each other, and I encourage you to remain as polite and as civil as you have been so far. But I sense some disagreements, at least, in your assessment of the policy. So I thought I'd give you an opportunity to respond, Dan, and then we'll return to our 2 officials on how the region might be able to spot some opportunities in what's going on. But over to you.
Yeah, so I agree with all the points that
Can I ask a
you
question?
made. They're all perfectly reasonable.
Of course.
This is a revolution. It's, as I was saying in my introduction, this is a dramatic change in the trade policy of the United States, because the current arrangement simply does not work for the United States. It's not in the interest of the United States. And not even in that it's unprecedented, because Reagan, for example, had voluntary quotas on Japanese exports to the United States. And he put tariffs on a lot of countries, many of them friends and allies, on India, on Brazil, and even European countries. And Reagan said, so that we don't need to go to Trump, trade is not free if it's not fair. The fundamental problem that the Trump trade revolution is addressing is that there is a lot of unfairness in the international trade system, primarily because of China, who lie, cheat, and steal on an epic scale. There were estimates that they are stealing something like 500 billion a year from the United States. And China getting stronger with this trade strengthened their regime, and you are right about them. They cannot afford to lose face, because they're an illegitimate, brutal dictatorship, and if they lose face, they get toppled. So I think, and we are in agreement on the formula. Okay, now in terms of predictability, it's a revolution. It's going to be messy for a while, but it is my profound conviction that what will emerge will actually be more fair trade and more free trade. For example, the European Union came and said, 0 tariffs. By the way, Jean-Claude Juncker, when he came in 2018 to meet with Trump sent him a text, which was common in conducting foreign policy in the Trump administration. So sent him a text. Yeah, and he said, 0 tariffs on everything. And Juncker said, but not on agricultural products. And now the European Union came back. 0 tariffs on industrial. How about our agriculture? No, we can't touch them, because the French farmers go and they block the streets, right, Joseph? They block the streets. So I think in the end, there is a high probability that we'll have a free world grouping of countries with low tariffs, free and fair trade. And China will be difficult, but they will be isolated. And a small disagreement, they have to cut a deal. They have to cut a deal. It will not be a drastic cut, but there will be a deal, just like they cut a deal with the Trump administration the first time around.
So,
just
go ahead.
Super quick comments. And this is not disagreement. This is just that throughout the week, nobody said it. So when we are, so let's use still a metaphor of cuisine. So we are doing now, let's do bouillabaisse. And tariffs, that's one thing, we can debate it, but then non-tariff barriers. Unlike tariffs, who are on purpose discriminatory, it's the instrument. When Trump is not happy, or anyone else is not happy about, I don't know, VAT. VAT is not discriminatory. Yes, US companies are paying it, Europeans as well. If there is this GMO products and agriculture, again, everybody has to do it. So to think that there will be harmonization in these non-tariff barriers, I don't know, harmonization in healthcare systems, so this cannot be. So I think it's important to divide it, discriminatory and non-discriminatory. That's point number one. Point number two, to agree, it would be great, more free trade between the US and EU, or between our allies in Pacific would be great for everyone. And we got this. There were 2 treaties, 2015-16, prepared, and both killed. So if there would be willingness now to have semi-free trade zone between the US and Europe, me as an economist, 100%.
Thank you. Yes, I mean, some of us remember the TTIP and also TPP, so the Trans-Pacific Partnership. Those were good ideas in their time, and I think I'll come back in a second. It's difficult to attribute blame on that. So I think it's easy to say that it's just because Trump was elected, but hard to see how Hillary moved it as well, but also how European parliaments might have ratified the treaty. I think that would have been quite difficult as well.
Yes.
So quick response from you, Dan.
Just very quick. No, it's not a response, really. How can I forget? Very high probability of a deal with the United Kingdom. Great willingness on both sides. Almost no tariffs and non-tariff barriers to speak of even today. So that will be a super easy deal. And I wrote an article entitled, "How to Make the Special Relationship Great Again."
British people would perhaps disagree slightly on the non-tariff barrier side. So I mean, these are cliches at this point, but there is a long-standing skepticism of what the US might want the UK to drop in terms of regulation to get its deal. And the sectors have already been mentioned. It's usually healthcare and food. Anyway, I think you, Petar, had a question to ask.
Yes.
And then this is where we start our interactive portion. I will start roving around the room. First, I will start with people who volunteer, so don't worry. But having good questions up your sleeve would be a good idea. So thank you, everyone, for preparing them. Go ahead.
So, yes, some brief reflection. For me, it is natural that these 2 biggest economic blocks in Western Hemisphere to have closer links and relations, I mean United States and EU. And we could look, we are focusing more on trade in goods, but when you look on trade in services, so the story is very different, and this is very good example of the story, because we know that the highest quality of such services is supplied from United States, and it is normal to be imported. And when in my sphere, when you look at credit rating agencies and a lot of other financial services, even in legal services, so we could see how this works in terms of services, and whether we could really make a parallels with goods, and how to look at the whole picture, not only trade in goods, but to accomplish and trade in services, and maybe we could get different picture doing like this. And because Jan mentioned his students, and I, just before coming to United States, my latest lecture before my students, it was about monetary approaches to the exchange rate. And the role of expectation is very important in such a models. And I'm wondering what type of expectations could fit the current situation. This is, I think it's very theoretical question, but it is very complicated question having in mind what is happening right now. So
it's absolutely true. The infamous formula did not include any services trade, which is something Europeans bring up quite often. In our experience at the Atlantic Council, this isn't something that really has cut through with the Trump administration. They don't necessarily listen when you talk about the services surplus. and it's not for lack of trying. Any response to that point? And then I think we have our first intervention from the floor. No? Marek, do you mind if I bring you in? We have our first question is from, comment, I think, from a Polish participant. So thank you. Go ahead.
Yes, thank you very much. Marek Wąsiński from the Polish Economic Institute. Thank you for inviting me. And maybe as a comment, I will quote Financial Times survey that was among US citizens and asked if they would like to bring manufacturing to the US. 70% of them said, yes, we want more manufacturing in the US, it's needed. But when asked if they want to work in one, only 20% of them wanted. So it's a, I would say, very important thing that what we need is to look into global system. Maybe friendshoring idea was one that was quite an important one, that we need friends, and actually US needs friends as well. And you cannot bring all the manufacturing in the US with such an unemployment rate, with lack of immigration. It will be impossible, or it will bring so high inflation that it will be crazy. When it comes to services trade, of course, it's very important, and I would say that U.S. administration wouldn't be happy with tariffs on digital services coming to the EU. But interesting point is also about investments. So there are U.S. investments in, for example, Ireland, so your country of origin, and they are in pharmaceutical industry. And actually, which country in the EU has the biggest surplus with the US? It's Ireland, and it's exactly the pharmaceutical sector that has this surplus, but it was excluded from tariffs. So it's the way that this trade, I would say that Ricardo is not that, and we need to look into comparative advantages, but we need to put externalities. And here where we should look into a common area of common interest between the US and EU is the externality of economic security. And as Mr. Jan Rosicka said, that, for example, pharmaceutical industry, military supply chains, these are important issues that we should focus on, build together word of safe, credible supply chains that we will be free of external pressure, and to give the market the space to invest where it's needed. And maybe two more points. So one point of disagreement, that EU tariffs on US goods are not 5%. They are very much similar to the US. So they are more equal in size when it comes to trade between the both, not maybe countries, but blocks. And second issue, that trade is not a zero-sum game. So and this is something that is very difficult in this discussion. So we need to have a win-win. So that's why we need to try to make the circle of common interest and common values, so that we make both of us better. So on the last point, when it comes to Poland, so we have a very good macroeconomic situation, but also indirect trade with the US is very huge. So 57% of value added created in Poland goes to the US, but indirectly. Only 33% goes directly. And so this indirect trade is so important for us, for our perspective, and with retaliatory tariffs, if they happen again in July, it would be 0.4% of GDP loss for Poland. And the biggest loser is, unfortunately, the US, if this whole retaliatory tariffs go into action. So from Poland, the question is how, so if you could elaborate more, do you see this common interest and this possibility that we focus on economic security? It will be a question. Thank you.
Anyone want to take that?
Can I just put some reflections on pharmaceuticals? Because recently, today, actually, there is an event which is pharma economy, and their main concern is that the administration here in the United States will change the rules how the price are set in terms of pharmaceuticals, and this will actually be negative for some European companies. So I think that this is also an issue and could be an issue in the nearest future.
Thank you. Jan.
To be positive, and you mentioned your country, of course, Poland. So with all what Morawiecki and now Tusk government are doing in case of defense spending, this is a win-win situation for the United States because a lot of spending is in the US. So this is an ideal sector where government can really push something. The similar energy. In Europe, we have either big public energy company or public-private, unlike United States. So there is a way how government can, if they want, to start a very practical debate about LNG from the United States and other things. This is also definitely possible. If there is some other strategic win-win situation, initiative, what we want to do together, it's possible. But otherwise, I think that from the overall debate is what I'm missing, that we talk like governments make deals. We are not in command economies. And we see what trust can do in case of US-Canada. Ask Canadian consumers what they think. Ask about United States tourism sector, what it thinks. So one thing is some big deals, but if on the way, this trust and the mutual win-win will be sort of, if it disappeared, we have a problem. And it will be very complicated to bring it back. And yesterday, actually on Fox News, what was very interesting, Ken Griffin, billionaire and a mega donor to Trump, he was talking exactly about this.
I think Wojtek, our financial supervisor from Czechia, wants to come in.
Oh, yeah, you wanted to.
Thank you. Actually, I wanted to react to what you said before. I think if the outcome of the current situation would be really a zone of free trade between the US and Europe, I would be more than happy. We have been always, as the country, as Czech Republic, have been, and we still are, among those in European Union who are very much pro-free trade. And there were always struggles within the EU with our French colleagues and our partners in the south with quite protectionist tendencies. And now we see the current situation also as quite an opportunity, even within Europe, for going this direction. So if this is the outcome, I will be really more than happy. But I'm not sure if this is really the purpose, actually, on the US side. So that's the question. I totally agree on the fairness of trade, and also that we have to look not only at the tariffs and tariff barriers, but also non-tariff barriers in principle. But at the same time, I think we should keep in mind that there always will be some, let's say, legitimate competition between states, even within the Europe. So you mentioned the Irish example. I think this is a perfect example. We have also still the discussion within the Europe, we should have all the same corporate taxation, let's say. I think this is not a good idea. I think it is good that there is a competition even among European states, and that the Ireland is a winner in this competition because of the low corporate taxation in comparison with other countries. So this is for me legitimate, actually. So we have to be cautious what we understand under non-tariff barriers and those unfairnesses. So if this is really unfair because of the state policy trying really to block free trade, then I'm totally for abolishment of these barriers, if you understand. But if it is this legitimate form as a taxation, for example, then I'm even for the free competition, let's say, among the states. But in going back, if the outcome will be free trade zone without any barriers and to have a single market as a dream, I would be really more than happy.
Thanks, Wojtek. If you don't mind, I wanted to bounce off something you just said on the likelihood of a deal. So if there's a deal and there's a better free trade or more free trade between the EU and the US, wouldn't that be wonderful? And it would support Czechia's long-standing position in favor of free trade. But in the counterfactual scenario, where we end up with less trade, more trade fragmentation, which unfortunately is pretty possible, you seem to have some skepticism of some of your partners, some other member states that have pushed for strategic autonomy for a long time. But let's say you have to accept that this is now the destination. How do you think your country will adapt to that?
So to be very frank, even if we always formally supported the strategic autonomy, at the same time have been a bit skeptical. So we all know that there is a. I'm sorry. So we know that this is beloved concept of Mr. Macron. We are on a slightly different side. So of course, the current development is helping those voices, even in Czech Republic and in Central and Eastern Europe, actually calling for more strategic autonomy for now. But I think it's the best interest of Europe not to overestimate this. So of course there must be certain energy autonomy, let's say, and so on. But in principle, I think that we have to keep trade partners abroad. And if there would be an adverse negative scenario towards US, we would be forced to find other partners across the world. So it is in our best interest as I said, as a small open economy, we are reliant on export. So we need trade partners abroad, not only within Europe, but also outside.
Thank you. Petar.
Yes, it depends how you look at this strategic autonomy, because in our area, central banking, we have two clear examples that we need more autonomy in it. The first is linking the payment systems throughout EU, because there are only 9 national schemes in terms of cards in EU Eurozone countries, but the cards are not the most important thing. The most important thing is how to link all this payment system, how to improve the service for the people, and how to reduce the price. So we could do this, and we could focus on this, and we should focus on this in order to manage the risks better. It is not against MasterCard and Visa, but it is to manage the risk and to see that all this area is developing, and not to lag behind in all this development. In Bulgaria, Bulgarian National Bank has participation in such a joint company, which is called Borica, and it is our national developer of payment infrastructure. So we should try to link payment infrastructures throughout European Union, because this will help to have really single market. And the other example in terms of central banking is cash, printing cash. We have also such joint venture with French company, Ouverture Fiduciaire, and this is really very good example of vertical integration. We have paper, we have ink, we have threads and security features, and we have printing the money, and we have the distribution of the money as well. So this is also very important to do this, and the people to have right to pay in cash if they want.
Thank you very much. So one of the objectives is to cover as many parts of the region as possible. We've done our best on the panel, but given this is such a busy week, we don't have all the countries of Central and Southeastern Europe represented. That would be difficult. But we're lucky in having Ilva, who's a senior fellow at the Europe Center of the Atlantic Council with us, who covers Western Balkans, presents our show, Balkan Debrief, and she has a few points to share with us for our economic dialogue, but also if you want to respond to some of the points on more of the strategic issues.
Thank you, Charles. To Dan's points, I just want to add more accent to the conversation. But to Ian's point, it was quite a relief to hear that your investments are turning more into Europe and Southeast Europe, and especially Western Balkans. That's where I want to bring your attention, actually. I just returned from a trip to Albania, a short trip to Albania, to my homeland. And as an Albanian American, I can say that the region, not just Albania, but the whole region, the 6 countries there, they do still believe in the promise of the European Union and EU accession. The problem is that turning that hope into real change on the ground is proven tough. In your view, Ian, I would like your opinion on this. What's more important to building lasting prosperity in the region? Is it being focused on the EU reform agenda, on the convergence criteria, or attracting more investment in a more effective and even creative way? And if the convergence is your thinking as a driving engine, what can the leaders of the region do to better communicate and to better explain it to people and actually deliver on these reforms so people can be supportive and also feel some of this real change in their lives? Thank you.
So
I think we'll go to Jan and then maybe to Petar as another Balkan country, but that is in the EU.
So look, I'm very vocal when talking to our European Commission friends and European Parliament friends. I'm very vocal about basically issues you just mentioned. We are very happy in Western Balkans. We like all the countries. We see it's great markets as well. And it's market already connected to Europe. Whether Serbia or Albania, just look on the numbers, European Union all around you. In case, let's have a Serbia as example, as a flagrant example, NATO all around you. So we cannot afford, as Europeans, not only for you guys in Western Balkans, but we as Europeans, we cannot afford to have a black hole there. It's win-win for everyone, for sure. And let me use another metaphor. So we have a first child at our household, and I'm trying to teach my daughter how to crawl and stand and walk, and it's a process. If it would be either you will be in bed or day one you will walk, it won't happen. And I think that focus too much, there is nothing, you need to do all the reforms and then there will be union, and before that we will talk about it, whether we even want to. This is creating skepticism, and Albania is ideal example because Albania and Montenegro, your for agenda is the best in the Western Balkans. It's like on steroids. But despite all the efforts, you are already flooding your parliament and government with everything, and this is not digestible. And maybe here, Messi and Macron was already mentioned here, maybe idea of European political community to give something quickly, especially in economic area. So yes, European commissioners and parliamentarians, etc. But I think that there shall be step case. Okay, you fill this chunk of the reforms, there is a candy. This part of reform, there is a candy, because then people don't see, they cannot touch it, they cannot feel it, and then European Union can be used easy to be attacked in local press, local parliamentarians, local politicians. We see it in Serbia, easy. Then there is somebody to blame. So I think this acquis communautaire zero-sum game, it's not the right one. I believe it's one of the reasons why everywhere in the Western Balkans support for union is going down in every single country. We, by the way, have seen, and this is where I give a button to my esteemed colleagues from Bulgaria, we see unhappiness in Bulgaria and Romania about Schengen recently, because there were no real reason why they shouldn't be in Schengen. So I think this kind of local unhappinesses needs to be taken care of, and Brussels shall understand them.
Top.
Okay, thank you very much. Two things. I actively have participated in this EU accession process back in time, and the things were different because really the situation, the global economic situation was quite different. And we experienced, because of the perspectives of joining EU and because of some reforms, of course, we experienced a huge inflow of foreign direct investments. In year 2007, there were 30% of GDP. So it was really impressive, and in comparison of current situation, 3.6%, it is really huge. So if the process is accompanied with foreign direct investments, this gives another very important impulse to people to believe in the process. And the other thing is EU itself. When we are continuously talking about the reforms, when we put a goals for EU, which we never met, but we put another goal afterwards, and we said we don't meet the previous target. But however, this target is much more better, and if we met this will promote the wealth, the prosperity of people, etc. So we should really focus on the reforms in EU, to stick to them, to follow them, to meet our targets, and this will provide good example for all these people at Western Balkans, because I could remember our EU presidency, it was 7-8 years ago, and we focus on and refocus the attention towards Western Balkan enlargement. It was our prime goal during our EU presidency. I think we put a lot of efforts and we have some success on this. And I also strongly believe that Montenegro and Albania are far ahead other countries, and probably they want to be part of EU in 2028. So let's hope that they have some chance and this will happen.
Hear, hear. I thought I'd bring in Martin, who's a non-resident senior fellow with the Atlantic Council Geoeconomic Center, former IMF official, who's also German, country that has been mentioned a few times already. So I don't exactly know where you want to take it, Martin, but over to you.
So if you look at it from a geopolitical, strategic angle, the United States is an aging superpower, a strong economy, but that's partly run on a huge fiscal deficit and a high fiscal burden. It has a weak defense manufacturing base compared to some of its adversaries, and the autocratic states have a large manpower surplus that the Ukraine conflict has just shown us is really decisive when it comes to modern warfare. So I'm seeing in some of these deals that are being proposed economically, but also on the military side, almost a bit of desperation to come to terms quickly with a situation that seems to be kind of going against the US's favors, and to restore some of the dominance and the role of the US that seems to be slowly slipping away from it. And on the military side, and that comes to my question, there seems to be, and that's not just a Trump phenomenon, there seems to be this intent of really, I wouldn't say forgetting about Europe, but just concentrating forces and strategic positions on the conflict with China, let's say the rivalry with China. So we're now facing a situation where the US is pushing for a deal that most Europeans in Ukraine would not support at the moment. And my question to you is, how do you see the economic implications if there were a relatively quick deal along the current lines without really changes to what the US is proposing right now? Would that be, on balance, a positive development for the region? Would that lead to some kind of resumption of normalcy when it comes to trade and economic relationships? Or do you think that over the medium term, because there's a risk of a re-intensification of the conflict at some point, if Russia feels strong enough to continue the war at some point, that the region will live under a bit of a shadow of uncertainty that will kind of deter investment and that will leave things in flux? Because it may not be a final settlement what we're getting under the current Trump administration.
Do you have anyone you want to hear from, Martin? In priority?
That's a question where...
Who wants to take it first?
Comfortable to.
Dan.
So, first of all, kindly send me the data where you see the tariffs for Europe, because I've seen the 5% and the 2.5%. I've also seen other numbers. So, incidentally, anyone who sees numbers, I'm sincerely interested, but that's what I've seen. You and Jan talked about the desire for trust and stability and predictability. There was predictability, some formula. I'm two economists, I feel so overpowered here. But, please recognize that we are in a situation where the United States under President Trump is readjusting things that have been a problem for the United States for a very long time. It's just that Trump has the courage to take drastic action to change these things. So, for example, by the way, my background is Wall Street, and there was a wonderful book on Wall Street in the early 90s entitled "A Fool and His Money is Welcome Everywhere." For the longest time, the United States.
Oh, I wouldn't say that.
Well, President Eisenhower would disagree with you. He said our allies treat Uncle Sam as Uncle Sucker, because they're basically asking us to defend them, and they are not spending on their own defense. So, Angela Merkel, one of my least favorite politicians in history, did say something spectacularly brilliant, though, that I strongly agree with. He said Europe has 7% of the world's population, 25% of the world GDP, and 50% of the welfare state. Well, the reason why they can afford that welfare state was that the United States was defending them, and the average GDP spending on defense for GDP after the fall of the Berlin Wall was 1.5%, while during the Cold War it was 3.5%. That's not a sustainable situation. Also, with all these economists here, I will say this, but I'm sure you can beat me very quickly because I almost failed economics. But anyway, they usually say, this is a flawed argument that the trade deficit matters. Trade deficits don't matter, because when I go to the barber, I pay my barber and I have a trade deficit with my barber. And then I go to the supermarket and I have a trade deficit with the supermarket. And that's normal. But it's not normal if you have a trade deficit with everybody. The United States trade deficit has grown consistently, and it's now something like 1 trillion. It's not sustainable. There's something wrong there. Which leads us to the question of manufacturing and defense. First of all, sir, I strongly disagree with you that the United States is a declining power and there is desperation there. On the contrary, the way I'm looking at it, that basically it's taking on the whole world and saying, look, guys, I have news for you. We are going to put these tariffs. And in Europe, by the way, we're pulling our troops out. No, don't pull the troops out. Stay, please stay. Well, why should we stay? Why do you need us? Well, we need to defend us from the Russians. Well, you had all those trade deals with the Russians, right? I mean, the US under Obama and under Trump the first time were begging the Germans not to do Nord Stream 2. It was one of the most illogical things in foreign policy I've ever encountered. Please allow us to increase our dependence economically on the Russians, but you need to defend us from the Russians. How does that make any sense? So I think you were talking about trust and predictability and allies and tourism and so on. It's a dramatic period of adjustment. And it will take a while. And there will be no predictability. And there will be no trust because there will be adjustments. This is done.
I mean, not try to minimize damage while we adjust.
No.
So we have to break.
During this period. During this period, there will be adjustment. This is not something that has been done many times. And one last point, which is this. The timetable of the Trump administration. And again, I don't represent the administration. I don't have any position. Okay. It's not 4 years until the next election. It's 2 years until the next midterms. And not even 2 years until the midterms. It's a few months because the positive results need to come out. And the positive results need to be convincing enough so the Republicans don't do well. Typically, parties in power lose. So anyway, just a few disparate comments here.
Thank you. Wojtek wanted to respond.
Yeah, actually, to your question, the economic impacts on the ending of the war, it would depend on the concrete terms and on what would happen with Russia and with the sanctions, in my view. So I would not overestimate the immediate effects of determination itself. I think that the European economy has adjusted itself somehow. And even the oil prices and the energy prices went down after in last month, obviously. So I wouldn't overestimate these immediate effects. But of course, if there would be some lifting of sanctions, that would of course influence the situation. But that's the big question, because at least in Europe, I do not see that tendency that it would bring about also this change in policy towards Russia. And then, if I may, two small remarks concerning the tariffs. I in principle tend to agree with the Polish colleague here, because I think it's very difficult to count the concrete tariffs. And for example, some tariffs, even from the European Union towards the United States, are only for symbolic reasons. So let's say the tariffs on cheddar were introduced really because of some symbolic reason, because there is actually no imports from United States of cheddar to Europe. But anyway, there are tariffs on that, so we have to count what is really important. And second remark concerning this strategic autonomy issue. So I think even the discussion on the payment system is a good example. I'm a bit, I have to say, skeptical here, because I'm advocate of the free market, and I don't think that the attempts of European Union to introduce something which is not market-driven, some sort of competition to market-driven solutions, I'm not sure if that will be really efficient. So let's say if we as a central bank would try to introduce a sort of digital currency and some app, application which would be a competition to market-driven apps, I don't think that the people really would would vote for that, actually. So I think that market-driven solutions are always the best. But
Can't think of a better segue into the next question from our participant. Just wait for the microphone, sir, and if you wouldn't mind introducing yourself.
So I'm Arne Vogels. I'm with MasterCard. So
told you it was a good transition.
On topic here. One of the things when we look at Europe, obviously this is a very important market for us. It's about 30% of our business globally is Europe. On the one hand, as you mentioned, there's that strategic autonomy motive that's really playing hard. On the other hand, and we heard it also yesterday from the governor of the Banque de France, is the need for innovation at speed in an integrated market. And where we're coming from is like, we are there, we want to continue being there, but it's more difficult. And so the question, to all of you is, what is more important? Is the strategic autonomy more important, or we're there to help you drive the economy, but we're not as welcome as we used to be? And frankly, there are some non-tariff barriers that are coming our way. So I'd like to get your views on that, on how to operate in such an environment, and how you would, do the trade-off between that autonomy and the innovation that you're looking for to drive the economy.
Yes. This is the main question, and I agree that we should not stop the market, the free market developing itself. It is not the case, but this does not mean that we shouldn't put some efforts in order to improve further and to link our payment infrastructure. So we should do this both with the companies, with the different views on this, but however, we should strike a balance, and we clearly need this linking the system and providing the people more better quality services, and to try to pay less charges. So it's clear. So the balance is very important, and I think that we should go in this direction. I regularly meet with your colleagues, both from Visa, from your company in Bulgaria. We are talking about all this, how really to achieve this. And we have crypto assets as well. We have some efforts from the private side to develop such payment systems, such payment things. So we should look at the whole picture, as I said, for the balance, trade balance, not only goods, but services. And here, how really to make synergies between all players in the market. So it is not strategic autonomy only, but however, the people matters and the consumer matters. And we should focus how to develop further the services in order they to be satisfied. And yes, this is for me the case. So.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Yeah, in my view, the more alternatives for payments there are, the better. The more competition, the market competition there is, the more better. The cheaper the services are, the better. Of course, there's the big question of the fees. But I don't think, and this is what I wanted to say, that the best solution is, or that we need some European solutions just for its own sake. So if there are new European market players, I totally would welcome that, but I'm skeptical concerning some creations from above by government decision or by the decision of government's authority. So
yes.
All the solutions should be, in my view, market-driven. That's the point.
I think this dichotomy crosses a lot of the issues that we've brought up today, but that people are thinking about a lot in Europe in light of recent developments in the US. On defense, you have the same. So do we purchase more US weapons because we need to defend ourselves now, and this will hopefully help us with the Trump administration, or do we focus on building our own defense industrial base? So it's a very similar dichotomy. Jan, you wanted to come in.
I will try to now sort of combine what we debated before, and I like your intervention so very much, because there is a reason why United States have a trade deficit with Vietnam and surplus with Australia. Because in the United States, you don't manufacture socks or T-shirts, and Vietnam economy or Vietnamese consumers, cannot afford what you are building here. Australians can, because they are very rich. And honestly, that was my mistake before Trump #2 started. Honestly, I expected that he will go this way. So you have great service companies. There are non-tariff barriers for companies like yours. There's a big debate about DMA, DSA acts, which is like problem for Silicon Valley guys in Europe. We can talk about it as a business problem or free speech problem, as Mr. Musk would say. But I believe that he will go this way, because at the end, if you are on the top, again, another reason, agricultural countries are not rich. Service companies, post-manufacturing countries are rich.
But he didn't go this way.
Yeah, exactly. So I would expect that there would be hammer, art of the deal kind of hammer, and then they will say, hey, we want companies like MasterCard and Oracle and Google thrive to Europe, and we want as free market for them as possible. Because this is America, and the same about defense companies. And so this is American strength. I don't think that guys here want to manufacture socks and T-shirts and to sell them to Europe.
What say you, Dan?
Well, I don't know anything about financial services. I can speak freely. No, on a serious note, strategic independence. There will be a lot more strategic independence in Europe by necessity, because the United States has an adversary in China, the likes of which it has never had in its history, in terms of comparable in economic power, a rapidly increasing military, very large population. The United States does not have the resources today to fight a three-front war, to fight a war in Asia, to fight a war in Europe, and to fight a war in the Middle East. At this point in time, Europe cannot defend itself from the Russians. Europe needs to build its defenses to the point where it can take care of itself. Again, I don't know who it was. I think it was Charles Michel, George Michel, whatever his name is, Michel.
Charles Michel, former council president.
Okay, who said, it is absurd.
Not George Michael.
Okay, it is absurd for 400 million Europeans to ask 350 million Americans to defend them from 140 million Russians, where the Russians have an economy a tenth of that of Europe. So it is an absurd situation. Now, Israel is taking care of itself in the Middle East. It's spending 4.5% of its GDP on defense. Our Polish friends, to their great glory, are spending 4% and are very respectable, 4.5%. Almost 5. So that's where it should go, almost full Trump. Sorry, just joke, couldn't resist.
That's way above real Trump.
Okay, well, he said 5% for all of Europe, which would be extra. Okay, also the Finns know how to do it. But then we have the major countries in Europe, Germany and the UK, who are not there. I mean, the numbers are extraordinary. Again, I've studied this at great lengths, and I couldn't believe my eyes, and I studied it again and again, and I looked at numbers. Germany had 500,000 people under arms at the end of the Cold War and 7,000 tanks. It has today 200,000 and 300 tanks, of which half don't work. And Britain, the same story. You know, they have the same army as in the time of Wellington. And either country, in the case of an intense war, run out of ammunition in 3 days. Those are numbers from last year, much better these days. Europe has the economic power, the manpower, and the tradition to increase its military capabilities significantly. It has to do it, and it must do it, and it's going to happen. And out of this will flow also a greater degree of economic and political independence. Now, the United States will remain the best friend, but okay.
Should Europe do so with American weapons or European weapons?
Both.
By necessity, it will be both, I agree. So Rheinmetall, for example, I was listening to a podcast in French. They were raving about Rheinmetall. The stock is up 150%, the economy, their production up by 36%. They're establishing factories all over Eastern Europe. The French have fantastic manufacturing, the Italians, the Spaniards, to my great surprise, the Swedes. There is the capability of doing it there. And yes, there will be less American, there will be certain things, but only the Americans can sell. But even that needs to be improved.
Thank you. Peter.
Yes, for me, what is clear that there is really, and the Trump administration is right, there is clearly a link between trade deficit and the budget deficit. So, but this is not only the way they are seeing this having revenues from tariffs in order to improve the budget deficit. The other thing that they are trying to do to improve the efficiency of spending. So this is really the most important thing, not only in the United States, but in other countries as well. Because when you are inefficient, where you are spending more and more and have budget deficit, the imports is growing. You couldn't manufacture everything, and this is normal. So there's clear link, and the focus should be on the budget deficit itself. So we are, as a central bank, continuously advising our Ministry of Finance to improve the efficiency of spending and to decrease deficit. We have very good track record of fiscal stability, but however, we are something nervous that we are at the breach of this, the limits of this 3% deficit, and we stayed here for several years. So clearly, we should also improve this, and this could solve part of the problem. So really, the administration is right here, but the focus on budget deficit should be even more than and not only relying on the tariffs, but the improving of the efficiency of public spending as well.
Good. Wojtek, I wanted to give you a chance to respond to some of the points that have come up recently. We've had, European self-reliance, defense, but also economic efficiency, trying to reduce some reduce deficits. Don't know if that, doesn't necessarily apply to your immediate mandate, but if you could comment on the Czech position in general.
Czech position on what exactly?
Well, on defense, defense spending.
Okay.
We haven't, we've mentioned some countries that are in Dan's good books and some that are not. So maybe you could defend Czechia's own reputation.
Okay, so we are in a similar position like our Polish friends, but we are not so successful concerning our defense spending. So our target is around 3 or above 3% for current, but we definitely agree that the whole Europe should go this direction. Mm-hmm. Definitely, and on the economic efficiency, I totally agree with my Bulgarian colleagues. So that's the same what we are doing as a central bank and trying to do towards our Ministry of Finance. But for now, the fiscal stance of the Czech Republic is quite good. The fiscal deficit has been lowered, and the general debt is not so high. So some 43%, expected 44 next year. So it's not so dramatic. Also thanks to the high inflation in last years, of course. But in that respect, the forecast is rather positive. Yeah.
Thank you. So this has been a bit of an experiment. We've tried to have more audience participation than usual at these events that we do for spring meetings. Well, hopefully I'll hear some of your feedback and let me know if it's positive or negative. But we've tried to cover quite a lot of bases. I think we have. So I'm very grateful to our panelists, to Jan, Dan, Wojtek, and Pitar. Thank you to all of you for attending. Hopefully this will not be the last Central and Southeastern European Economic Dialogue during the IMF World Bank Spring meetings. So thank you for joining us. This afternoon we have some very interesting guests too. We have the Finance Minister of Spain and the Finance Minister of Greece. Do stay tuned because we're also doing some really exciting interviews at our IMF pop-up studio, including one on European autonomy and investment. So some of the topics that you've heard today will also be talked about this afternoon. So thank you everyone for your attention. It's been a pleasure to talk to all of you and see all of you soon. Thank you.
Thank you.